Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to another Burlingame. It's a small-town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. This is Mark Lucchese, also known as Mark at the Mic, and my guest today is proud to be representing California District 15 in the U.S. House of Representatives. His passion for civic engagement and democracy started early. As the son of a high school government teacher and a mother who enjoyed lively discussion at the dinner table, he learned early that civic engagement and being an active participant in the political process gives you a voice in your local, state, and federal government. I'm honored to have as my guest today a fellow Sarah High grad, U.S. Congressman Kevin Mullin. U.S. Congressman Kevin Mullin, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you, Mark.
Thank you. And as we go forward, can we just call you Kevin throughout the show? Is that okay? Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Kevin, we got a lot of ground to cover today, but I guarantee you one thing, we're going to have some fun doing it. So let's get after it, okay?
Love it.
All right. So you have just about completed your first term, and you are now up for re-election. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Your father, Gene Mullin, was on the South San Francisco City Council and served as the mayor as well. He was also a California assemblyman for 6 years.
That's right.
And he must have had a strong influence on you getting into politics. As I mentioned in the intro, your family talked politics at the dinner table, kind of like mine talking about the grocery business. And I think that's all about passion. Yeah. I really do. So, however, you did not enter into politics right away upon graduating from USF. You founded KM2 Communications,
that's right,
a multimedia production business in South San Francisco. Am I good with all of that so far?
You are rock solid here.
Great. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about KM2 Productions?
Yeah, so KM2 Communications.
Yeah.
KM2 Communications was a small business in South San Francisco I founded with a business partner of mine, Brian Kingston, who is still in the media business. It actually was sort of an outgrowth of my interest in the media and communications, which is why I'm enjoying this experience, seeing these microphones.
Right.
And, I actually wanted to be a journalist and a media personality of sorts going through school. I studied communications at USF and was on the I was on the student senate, but I was the general manager of the student radio station.
How cool was that?
Yeah. So I really wanted to go in the radio business, TV business. I was an intern at KTVU, Channel 2 for actually a couple of years until I think they finally kicked me out. They said, we're kind of done with your internship here. Can you move on and do other things?
Were you doing that while you were at USF or beyond that?
Yeah. So I was, I think I was a senior at USF, and then I continued right after college. Actually, my first gig was in the mailroom of an advertising agency, which is now defunct. It's called McCann Erickson,
wow.
Making $14,000 a year right out of college. I, needed to find a job, and it was at least in the broader media space.
In that business, you take what you can get and try to move up. Absolutely.
And I got to tell you, it was one of the funnest experiences I had. A lot of young people trying to break into media, advertising, and so forth. I had the fortune, and I'm sort of telling you my life story here.
That's
just
okay.
Jumping right into that.
That's
but
all right.
It all sort of connects at some point here. But I went to the big game, Stanford versus Cal, at Cal, and met a woman who was the girlfriend of a guy I worked with. And she worked for a local state assemblyman in the East Bay named Johan Claes, and interviewed over there. Actually was the second choice, but the first choice didn't want to take the job or moved on to something else, and I was able to get that job. But in the back of my mind, I still at some point wanted to work in the media, in communications somehow. I just had a passion for that. So that found its way into the entrepreneurial space where I founded KM2 Communications. And that was where I sort of was able to use those comms skills in one way or another, on-camera interviews and shooting PSAs and the creative process, which I have to tell you, I do miss sitting in the studio and sitting in an all-night edit. The creative process that goes with that. But did that for a number of years while I got elected to local office to the South San Francisco City Council. So it was actually a great balance running a business, but also doing public service and sort of pursuing multiple avenues at the same time, really.
Yeah, and I also discovered that you were a mobile DJ for a while. Is that correct? And you have a little handle. What was the name?
That goes way back.
Yeah, it goes back, right?
High school, into college, and outgrowth of being on the student radio station. I had a mixed show there, and we would do these live broadcasts. They actually had a bar on campus, if you could believe that. A bar on campus
I believe
at USF
it. I've seen them now, yeah.
The Fog and Grog, and we'd have these grog nights and do live mixes, and occasionally I'd be referred to as Cutmaster Kevy Kev.
That was it. Yeah, I love it.
I've retired that nickname.
Did you? Yeah.
But it was a really fun time in my life.
Okay. So how did your experience as a small business owner shape your role as a legislator?
Well, it's crucial. There are so many issues that came through. I did 10 years after the city council and being the mayor of South San Francisco. I was elected to the California State Assembly and did 10 years there. And there were numerous times that issues came across my desk that affected business owners, affected small business owners. The franchise fee of $800 just to set up shop in the state of California, which always bothered me. We shouldn't be erecting barriers for startup businesses. Those kinds of issues. I served on the Business and Professions Committee, and I think just having to sort of meet your own payroll and all of the pressures around client development, and we sort of rode the wave, the ups and downs of the economy. And you have a set group of clients, and instead of doing 4 projects that year, they're going to do 2, and just sort of managing all of that. It was a real growth period, I guess, professionally for me, running that company, and I think it made me sensitive to just all of the economic challenges that business owners of all types and all sizes have doing business in a really high cost area.
Yeah, that's invaluable experience as a business person. It really is invaluable experience. Terrific. Okay. So, I want to talk a little bit about your time in Washington. It's been almost 2 years now, right? Yeah. And I don't think a lot of folks really know what goes on in a congressman's life during the day and all that. So first of all, how has the Washington, D.C. experience been so far?
It has been an incredible opportunity. I will be honest, it has been a real adjustment period for me, just in terms of the lifestyle. And that has to do with the travel.
Are you saying, Kevin, it was a little easier traveling from San Francisco to Sacramento, and now you're going coast to coast,
you got
basically?
It.
Yeah.
Just the weekly grind of travel. I really didn't mind, frankly. I would drive back and forth on a daily basis. My first couple of years in Sacramento, I had an apartment up there, but this is before we had kids. And,
right.
I was able to spend a few nights up there and, do the after work circuit. It feels a little 24/7 sometimes up there. But that was, I adjusted to driving back and forth every night when we had kids. And but just the ability to do a 90-minute drive and get home as needed. It has been a real adjustment when I'm gone during the week. So my wife and 2 boys, 2 little 6-year-old twin boys, not so little anymore. They're already starting to eat us out of house and home, and they're only 6.
Yeah.
But being away from them during the week has been a real challenge. Now I think certainly my wife understands. If she wasn't on board for this, this never would have happened.
It's not going to happen, right?
She had worked on Capitol Hill. She has sort of been with me through the ups and downs of politics, knew that this was something that I had thought about over the years as a possibility. So she was fully on board. But just the sort of reality of going back and forth has presented its challenges. But I'm reminded of what an incredible opportunity this is, what an honor this is to represent San Mateo County in the U.S. House of Representatives. And honestly, much of my career has sort of built to this point for this incredible opportunity. Even with all of the extremism and volatility, really, of Washington politics, it is an incredible opportunity to bring dollars home, represent this incredible area that I am, frankly, been accused of being a cheerleader for. But there are so many incredible things happening right here in our county,
a great place to be a
economically and
cheerleader.
otherwise.
Yep.
It's an incredible honor. But any kind of new job has an adjustment period, and I'm still working my way through that.
Okay, so talking about the traveling coast to coast, do you like You're in Washington. Are you flying out on Friday night and coming home and then leaving Sunday night from South City and going back? Or
So
how does that work?
The sort of average week would be I fly out at 8 a.m. on Monday morning. I have an apartment in the Navy Yard area in about 12 minutes from Longworth Building. So I walk to work every day. A little one-bedroom apartment there, and spend Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night there. Full tilt. Tuesday and Wednesday back there are just like full tilt days, wall to wall. Thursday, we have votes in the morning, and generally it's a fly out day. So I'm able to get on the 5 o'clock there on Alaska. Alaska's my airline.
Right.
They've got great routes into DCA, which is close to Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
So I'm an Alaska person. They will fly me home, and I'll get home at about 8:30, just in time to put the boys down on Thursday night.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Great. So can you tell me what it was like, and, use your memory a little bit here.
Yeah.
Your first day as a first-term congressman in Washington. What was that like?
Pretty surreal, frankly. You don't really know what to expect as a freshman congressman. And I think, there are a lot of good folks that try to do an orientation and kind of get you set up. But candidly, you just sort of feel like you're jumping into the ocean a little bit, trying to figure things out. And, the little nugget I tell is they gave me this pin, which I'm actually wearing right now.
I see that.
This green pin. This is my freshman member's pin, and it had 415, the number 415 on the back. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, because I do represent a portion of San Francisco.
I know, yes.
And I'm like, that's interesting. They put the area code of my district, the northern part of my district, on my pin. And they said, no, sir, that's your seniority number. Not the area code in which you represent.
Not exactly number one in seniority, right?
Yeah. So, 415 out of 435. And I thought to myself, well, geez, I already jumped 20 spots.
Right. Amazing.
They said, for the freshmen, we just do it in alphabetical order.
That's terrific.
So with George Santos resigning and a few other things happening, I'm going to be up into the probably the high 300s, I think.
That's awesome. Awesome. Great.
By the time I return, if I'm fortunate enough to get reelected and return in January of 2025.
So you mentioned a little orientation. So was there like a meet and greet process that you went through, and that's when you got your lapel pin and all that? Did they break you guys up?
It was all done right there on Capitol Hill. And, it's really, you have to assemble a staff very quickly. In fact, you're not actually legally able to offer a position to employees until you're sworn in. So this was a really, and the reality is you do have some conversations, but you can't, sort of officially offer positions until you are a sworn-in congressman or woman. The reality is we had a very unusual set of circumstances at the beginning of 2023. We had 15 rounds of voting to elect a speaker, if you'll recall.
Oh, I remember. And
saga playing out on CNN.
I watched it avidly.
Yeah, so we were sitting on the floor and voting, and I was a Congress member-elect, but I was not a Congress member, because the very first piece of business that is done is a speaker is elected, and then everything flows from there in terms of the swearing in and the establishing offices and so forth. So procedurally, that is quite literally the first piece of official business that gets done. Well, that took days and days.
I think 4 or 5 days, didn't it?
4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
So we were really in a state of limbo. I had my wife and boys out there. They spent some time at the zoo back there, and I wanted them there for the swearing in. The reality is we were waiting for days. I got sworn in at 2 a.m. They were fast asleep at the Airbnb.
Yeah.
So they didn't get to see any of that. But we did get an opportunity to meet Hakeem Jeffries and take a nice family photo. And but it was some of the folks who've been around Washington a long time were telling me, yeah, this is not normal, Kevin. This is as unusual as it can get in terms of a startup process for a freshman.
Right.
So you just had to kind of roll with it.
Yeah.
But the reality is, even as a Congress member-elect, we had constituents that had needs who were previously Jackie Spear's constituents, my predecessor, my mentor, the iconic Jackie Spear. She left office and was no longer a Congress member, and I was simply a Congress member-elect. So it was a really weird transition, a very unusual set of circumstances, but we were able to assemble the staff quickly, make sure that our constituents got their questions answered and their needs met. But it felt a little bit, candidly, like the startup business KM2. It had all of the same hallmarks of a startup operation.
I could only imagine. Yeah, I can only imagine. Boy.
Sort of getting these two offices, standing those up and getting those moving. But it was an extraordinary experience and a little bit of history, honestly, to start with that long, drawn-out process to find a speaker in Kevin McCarthy, who, as you know, later in the term would be essentially deposed, and a whole set of votes for a replacement speaker. So it has been chaotic. It's been volatile. Some of the extremism, candidly, and I don't want to make this overly political, but it's been, for the most part, on the far right extreme. The Freedom Caucus folks that have really made it a challenge for the leadership of the Republican Party to sort of govern and just maintain some stability. So it's been a extraordinary time to witness all of this unfolding, and then now we're entering this presidential cycle. So it's going to be a highly political fall, as we know, and I'm hoping for more stability in my sophomore term. Let's put it that way.
I bet, yeah. So I'm just kind of wondering, and I had a few people ask me this question to ask you. How does a congressman find a place to live in Washington? I mean, like, are you looking at the real estate rental section of the Washington Post? How do you know where to go when you get there in Washington? Well, I need an apartment. What do you do?
Trying to recall precisely how that worked, but actually the first, I'd say maybe 6 months, I was living out of a suitcase at the Hyatt Regency on the Senate side of Capitol Hill while I tried to sort of figure out what I was going to do on that front.
Yeah.
They got used to seeing me come into the Hyatt with a big blue suitcase. So I was really like a business traveler for the first stretch. Eventually, that just kind of wore me down, and I said, this is going to be pricey.
Yeah.
But I think I'd rather have a place where I can know where I'm going and can leave some suits there and set up a sort of second lifestyle. So I have an incredible executive assistant who sort of helps on a variety of fronts, Stephanie Pereira, and she actually had lived in Navy Yard. And there are a lot of staff folks. There are a number of members. I have, I think, 4 other members that live in my apartment building. So it's a pretty common place for Capitol Hill folk to
What do they call that? The Naval Yard? The Navy Yard?
So Navy Yard.
Navy Yard.
It's sort of an older industrial area that got redeveloped when the Nationals put their ballpark there on the Anacostia River right there. And so it's become sort of a stadium district, a little bit like Mission Bay.
Right.
And lots of apartments. So I think I had an opportunity to live with some colleagues, but I was thinking, I talk politics all day. I'm, talking government and politics during the day. When I get home at night, I think I just want to relax and maybe watch ESPN and try to
break away
unwind,
a little bit.
do a little reading in anticipation of the next day and call it a day. So I've got a nice little setup there, and it's close enough that I could walk right to my office building there. But it actually was not too difficult to find a place. I was a little worried about that. But once I decided to find a place, it happened pretty quickly. And that is the way to go. But, it's pricey.
Oh, it's got to be.
And, Jackie would tell you that I'm fortunate. They instituted a per diem program that helps offset some of your living expenses. It's interesting. It's considered taxable income, but it does help defray some of your costs for food and living. And that is certainly helpful, but it's difficult, maintaining 2 households. And it's definitely not a cheap place to live in Washington,
I can only imagine. It's got to be expensive. All right, so you're getting settled in. How did you get an office? I mean, did somebody help you find an office when you were there and appointed a staff? How does that come around?
Well, one of the first days there, I guess it was the first day, they had a lottery for offices. And it was actually a 2-step lottery system. And so you there's a lottery for your place in the pecking order, if you will. And then there's actually, I think, turn this big thing over and you pull a number out, and that's sort of where you're ranked. And you, at that point, when your number gets called, you have to pick from the remaining offices that are available. Now, the staff will tell you what they do is they sort of map out, okay, this is probably what's going to be left by the time your number comes up. These are the offices we like. I chose the one in Longworth because it's right near the stairs, and it's pretty easy access down to the tunnel. We have to walk through an underground tunnel to get to the Capitol for voting, so it was pretty convenient. And it's a nice freshman office, and once we got that location and we picked it out, we had to set it all up. And what is interesting?
Now, what do you mean by set it all up? There's their desk in there, a chair in there?
Yeah. So the furniture's there. You're able to put your own sort of personal effects up on the wall, and those kinds of things. So the basics are there. And IT came out and set up our computers and got us going. It was actually a little more challenging in the district. I did not inherit Jackie's district office. We had identified an office in the same building where I was an assembly member on El Camino Real in San Mateo. There was essentially like right across the hall, there was a suite that we really liked, and we were comfortable and familiar with that building because I had been there 10 years. So there was a process of moving some of the items in Jackie's office over to this new office that we set up. We had a few changes from a security standpoint we had to make in the office, which actually are still ongoing. We're making some changes still to that office, but it's a great office, lots of space, very convenient. It's right across from Diane Pappin's office.
So we're talking in San Mateo right now?
San Mateo.
Yeah.
17th and El Camino in San Mateo. And for a while there, Josh Becker was also in that building. Okay. So we had the assembly member, the senator, and the Congress member. I liked that idea of sort of packaging the government offices so we could work together and serve our constituents if they had a state issue, but also a federal issue. So Josh Becker, his district configuration, it was more convenient for him to have an office in Palo Alto ultimately. So he did make that move, but Diane and I are still in the same location, and all the staffs and the members, we have a good working relationship, just given all the overlap we have in serving our constituents. But there were some just logistical challenges with setting up the district office, and that's where really the rubber meets the road. That's where the constituents need to be served. And my staff does an incredible job with the whole panoply of federal issues that constituents have. So that happens in the district office. So I wanted to make sure that didn't get neglected while I was in Washington setting up the Capitol office. We made sure that we got that office up and moving. And now we're fully settled and serving the constituents. But yeah, it's a bureaucratic process in DC. Every 2 years you can get a new office. I happen to like our office right now, but I think our staff would like a little more room, more of a waiting area, because lots of groups coming through, lots of folks, especially when they're from the district, they want to come visit their congressman, which is incredible. That's my favorite part.
Yeah. How did you appoint your staff? How did you find your staff? Did you bring anybody from California with you?
What was really helpful is there was a bit of a transition with Jackie where I hired a number of her staff. And she vouched for them. They had been working for her. There was that really helped smooth the transition between Jackie's operation and my startup operation. Yep. So my chief of staff, Kate Adams, was Jackie's deputy chief of staff, and she was ready to be promoted. And so she was my initial hire. I take that back. Mario Rendon, my district director, it was always sort of implied that he'd come with me in the local office. Yeah. But in terms of DC, my first hire was my chief of staff, and she is tremendous with HR issues, and she was able to assemble a staff very quickly of quality people, some with Capitol Hill experience, some not, some with more local experience. In fact, Brian Rogers, he was my campaign manager when I ran in the district here. He wanted to go to Washington, and he proved himself on the campaign, super capable. So he became my deputy chief of staff, and he's actually, in a real sort of professional growth period where he's learning about legislative. He also handles some of my out-of-the-office affairs back in Washington, D.C., after hours kinds of things politically because he's got the campaign connection. But he's been a tremendous staffer and really good on environmental issues. And so I've got an incredible team in Washington, especially for a freshman, which is not, I have to say, not always the case. But I have some experienced hands, but also, some folks that are really growing into the role that I've given them.
I imagine you have some interns as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a capital internship program. We also have district interns as well throughout the year. And we always get a good crop from the local schools in our local office here. And we have some folks with local connections, but who want to do a summer in D.C., for example. They will get an internship. And it is, I have to say, and I referenced my KTVU internship. The reason I loved that was it was really hands-on. I wasn't just sort of sitting at a desk. I was actually, I felt at least that I was helping that production.
And you were learning, right?
And I was learning every day. And it's the same thing here. And there's a lot of time on the phone, talking with constituents, getting opinions, but a lot of writing. These interns, with some oversight, of course, from my legislative staff, are developing my responses. I read everything, of course, that goes out. But it's a real opportunity for them to better understand policy, sort of how I develop my position on things, and then just the basic sort of writing skills and communication skills. So the feedback we're getting is it's a very positive experience, and I want this to be a memorable, positive experience for the interns. And as a former staffer myself, and I did work for Jackie Spear for a number of years, I also sort of appreciate things from the staff level. I think I have an understanding of what kind of a boss the staff would appreciate in terms of giving them opportunities for growth. So I've been able to sort of use that staff experience in more of like a management capacity now. Okay.
So this question now comes from the pile of, there are no stupid questions, okay? Or dumb questions. And we don't want to mention numbers here, but are you given a budget to hire a staff with? How does that work? I mean, some are getting paid, some aren't, right?
So we actually do have paid interns.
Interesting.
In the Capitol, we have a paid internship program. So we are given a budget, and what I found interesting is regardless of the seniority, all of the House members are given sort of a base budget to operate within. What I didn't know going into the job is if you exceed your budget for any reason.
It's on your dime or
what? It's on your dime. You are on the hook personally.
Yeah.
So, as you might imagine, I keep a pretty close eye on
I bet.
Expenditures, and my team is very conservative with our spending. I would say, just to make sure we are able to stay under the budget, and we get a little bit of a COLA from year to year, from session to session, which can help. And we're able to prepay a few things, which kind of helps defray cost for the following year. But that really is a key role for my chief of staff and my district director, who are managing their respective budgets for the office, and making sure that we're paying people what they deserve, but we're also mindful of being judicious with how we're spending the funds. So that too feels a little bit like running a small business. I mean, that's how people describe it back there. It's like you're sort of like the CEO of this small business operation with these two offices. And then I also have the campaign side completely separate from the official side. And I, too, am responsible
because they're more temporary, or what? Is that a separate thing because they're kind of temporary? When the campaign's done, they go away till next time, or what?
It is separate. When I say separate, it's completely separate from the official operation. There can't be any sort of crossover there. It's a distinctly separate operation. But I have a treasurer, campaign treasurer. I've got a campaign attorney, separate from the treasurer. I used to have them under the same roof, so to speak, but they are separate now. A campaign attorney, a campaign treasurer. I pay a couple of staff people a stipend on a monthly basis just to do a variety of political things. Since we're in an election year, there are just myriad sort of paperwork things you have to do with the elections office to make sure you get a ballot statement in the ballot pamphlet, and just sort of the nuts and bolts of the political side, which I just have to keep an eye on. And, I've got to do fundraising, my probably least favorite thing to do. But there's a whole political side of the shop where, I not only raise money for my political operation, my own reelection, but I do help the DCCC, Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. We're trying to flip some seats in California and take the majority back, which would really change the nature of the job, frankly, when you're in the majority and are able to move an agenda as opposed to vote no on lots of things.
Right. It's
a completely different way of doing the job. So there's definitely this political dimension that I operate in addition to the priority, which is the official capacity I operate in. So it's a lot. It's a lot. But the small business thing, it definitely, a lot of how I sort of approach things and operate things comes back to that experience, I would say.
Well, just to keep yourself even more busy, you sit on some committees too, right?
Yep.
Can you share with us some what those committees might be?
Yeah, so I serve on the Natural Resources Committee. Lots of climate oversight. It's a combative committee. It's controlled by Republicans now.
Once a month, once a week, every other week? How
every
often?
Week. There'll be a standard sitting meeting, but there will be occasional subcommittee meetings. And what's been real challenging there, candidly, is because we don't have the gavel, we're not in control of that committee. I certainly have an opportunity to speak on various issues, but we're not really able to move legislation through those committees. It's more of a blocking action, and in reality, when you try to block something, they have the votes, they have the control.
Right.
Those measures will get passed through.
Well, let me ask you something. Were you assigned those committees, or did you choose these committees?
I asked for those committees.
You did,
I also put in a request in for the Energy and Commerce Committee, which candidly I knew I was not going to get. You don't get it's one of the four really powerful committees. Freshmen don't get assigned to that committee, generally speaking. But I asked for that committee, and I should say I'm hopeful. I am hoping to serve on that committee to succeed the great Anna Eshoo.
Yeah, she's going out this year. Is that correct?
She's retiring. She's been a ranking member on that committee. She chaired when we had the majority, when the Democrats had the majority. She chaired the Health Subcommittee of the Energy and Commerce Committee, this sprawling jurisdiction around the whole panoply of health-related issues in America. So a very powerful committee. I'm hoping to succeed her on that committee. So I asked for that just to sort of put a marker down. I knew I wasn't going to get that, but I was very interested in natural resources given my work on climate resilience. I did a lot in Sacramento on climate resilience bond and different things. We're right here on the bayfront. So we've got sea level rise issues on the ocean side. We've got sea level rise issues on the bay side. Just a whole range of issues dealing with sea level rise. It's a great committee to sit on. And I also was interested in the Science, Space, and Tech Committee. I did get on that committee. And that's a great committee for the district that I represent, which runs the southeastern portion of San Francisco, but down the Bayside all the way to East Palo Alto. But my hometown of South San Francisco, over 300 life science companies. So there's a life science connection with that committee. There's also a bunch of issues that I knew very little about that I'm learning about in terms of the way NASA operates and low Earth orbit and all sorts of issues
Does
around
that committee
space.
also meet once a week? Are they all meeting once a week, basically?
Yeah, they meet regularly when we are in session.
Yeah.
Occasionally, we'll have to sort of postpone votes and go to the floor and vote there and go back to committee. So one thing I did notice, the Sacramento legislative calendar and schedule was much, much more predictable than Washington, D.C. There are so many variables that come into play when votes get called, and just the nature of the wrangling between the leadership of the parties and what actually makes it to the floor. Things were much more predictable, and I was the Speaker Pro Tem.
I know. I think you were the longest one in California, weren't you? In history?
Longest serving Speaker Pro Tem of the term limits era, which is a little qualifier. Nonetheless, I had a great run.
Was it 10 years?
So I was a Speaker Pro Tem for 8 years.
8 years, yeah.
And just a great role for me, actually using some of the communications background I had. You're managing the floor. You're sort of like the anchor man of the assembly in a way. You're sort of conducting the affairs of the assembly on the floor. And I loved that role. And we had a Democratic supermajority, which helped too. So I was in the leadership, and we were able to get lots of things done over that 10-year period. So I haven't been able to replicate that.
Not yet. Not yet.
But we're
down the road, right?
We're working on it. We're working on it. And if we take the majority, they rotate the position, but I'll be able to preside over the House of Representatives, which will be a real thrill for me.
Oh, gosh, yes. Yeah. Absolutely, man. Okay. Recently, my wife, Kathy, your 7th grade teacher at St. Veronica's Catholic Elementary School in South San Francisco, your hometown, she and I went to see the movie Reagan. And there was a sequence in there where Reagan meets the Democratic Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill.
Yep.
And Reagan kind of puts his finger on his chest and says, Tip, we're going to battle all day long, but at 6 o'clock, the day is over, we're going to share a beer. Yeah. Does any of that kind of go on anymore, Kevin? Do you socialize with anybody on the other side of the aisle? Do you go for dinner and drinks or anything like that?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. So, these are things that don't get a lot of attention, but there is a concerted effort right now for the California delegation to really sort of restart relationship building among the parties. So our California Democratic delegation meets weekly over lunch, and I certainly have lots of good relationships with those folks in the Bay Area and outside the Bay Area. But I always sort of wondered, why doesn't the entire California delegation meet to talk about priorities across party line? And that meeting, as I understand it, used to occur, but based on certain personalities and just the sort of pitched kind of partisan battles that we've seen in recent history, those meetings no longer occurred. So there's an effort to try to sort of informally get the two parties in California together, and that's a little dinner series. And I have to give a shout out to my good friend Jay Obernolte, Republican, who represents Big Bear. He and I served together in the California legislature, and we had a good relationship there. And he's a pretty conservative guy, but he believes in science. He's a frankly, from anybody I've talked to back there, he's got real expertise on artificial intelligence. He's a former video game developer, business guy, super smart individual. And I'm going to be hosting him in my district to show him around, show off San Mateo County, show off the life sciences and the innovation economy that we call home. And that calls San Mateo County home, I should say. And then he's going to return the favor and bring me to his district, a very red part of California.
Yep.
But I think that's going to be good for me to understand the kind of conversation, the kind of issues that more rural and exurban California has. So these are like baby steps, right?
Sure.
But some of the conversations we had over dinner were really excellent. And we sort of parked, we went out of our way to park some of the really hot things, but we were focusing on, just what are some things that we can do collectively. But really, it was more about just relationships. It wasn't so much policy conversation. It was really more like getting to know the individual and just all of the challenges we have coming from California with the travel and sort of the commonality.
And I think that's very important, isn't it? It's about the relationship.
Absolutely. So I fully expect that to continue regardless of, who has the majority. And, if I'm fortunate enough to do this job for the foreseeable future, I want to make that, a central piece of my efforts. Is there are lots of issues that you can't put in a partisan box, but are really, really important to California just in terms of our funding needs and everything. Fifth largest economy in the world. We've got to be in alignment on, how we keep our economy strong. The innovation economy is a great space to sort of work those issues, I think.
Okay. One of the bills you introduced is the Poverty Line Act, which aims to update the federal poverty line to account for national differences in the cost of living. And congratulations, I understand a Republican co-sponsor has just signed on. Is that correct?
So we are reaching out, even as we speak, to Republican colleagues. Unfortunately, it has gotten framed a little bit in a partisan context, and it really shouldn't.
Okay.
This is one of these issues that really it's a modernization of government issue. The Poverty Line Act is an outgrowth of the Great Society, Lyndon Johnson. We're talking about
goes
the
way
60s,
back.
goes way back. And it was based on food costs, which most certainly is a significant cost. But that is kind of the baseline calculation. The reality is modern families have childcare costs. We are an epicenter of the affordable housing challenge. Housing costs are significant. Healthcare costs, utility costs. This is something that I think resonates with people, regardless of your party affiliation. We live in a very high cost area. The challenge, it just makes all the sense in the world that you regionalize these things. So like really high cost areas, you factor in regional costs of living into the formula. The reality is it would probably make more people eligible for a range of federal programs that would help them make ends meet. So there would be a cost associated with that. So that becomes a challenge just around the fiscal conversation. But I'm framing it as a modernizing of government effort. And, these cost challenges aren't just Bay Area issues or New York issues. This is a 50-state challenge of looking at cost of living in different areas and helping families who are struggling. And the reality is there are folks that don't qualify for federal programs right now, but they simply don't make enough to make ends meet.
So this would kind of help that out then, or what?
This would change that baseline formula and make more folks who really deserve the assistance eligible. But anytime you try to challenge the status quo, it's very difficult, right? So the most powerful thing in politics, I like to say, is the status quo. And there are a lot of folks who are invested in that. And there are folks who are concerned about when you change a funding formula, there are winners and losers. I'm sort of suggesting, look, we need to raise the floor on this, and we need to modernize. We need to look at the real cost pressures for everyday families in this country. And this has become sort of a vehicle for that conversation. Now, I've been very honest about this. Any change of this magnitude does not happen quickly. It will probably, in all likelihood, take years and years and years to educate and advocate.
Wait a minute. You introduced this bill, and it could be years before it becomes a law? Is that what you're telling me? Really?
Hey, man, I would love nothing more than to guarantee that my bills become law in short order.
Do all bills take that long? I mean,
depends. It depends, right?
Wow.
So in Sacramento, for example, I got over 60 bills signed into law, but a number of those, and I'm going to have to sort of go back in time here, but a number of those, I would try in one session. It would be defeated. I would have to come back again with maybe a modified version to try to build a coalition of support. So when I say years, I would not be shocked if I have to introduce this measure a number of times for it to build the coalition of support.
This Poverty Line Act is what you're saying. We're referencing that, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
I wish it were easier. And now it's made easier when your party controls the majority. But even then, I got to say, look, even then, we had a supermajority in Sacramento. I had a number of bills defeated because it's not so much about just party line votes. It becomes when you're challenging special interests, you're challenging powerful entities. The likelihood of defeat is always there. So I just think, given the history around this formula, and we've openly talked about this in the office, like, is this going to be worth the amount of staff effort that we're going to put in? Because ultimately we want to be successful, and that may take a form where it's not necessarily my bill that becomes law, but it becomes embedded in the appropriations process. There's different ways to pursue the policy ends. You have to be strategic about how you do that. But there's a reason nobody's actually introduced legislation to change the Poverty Line Act. What has been done, folks have introduced bills to create task forces and blue ribbon committees, and let's study this and come up with some consensus recommendations. That's usually the course of action when you've got something that is so embedded into the way things work. I decided to sort of circumvent that and go right to a policy that says we're going to empower the agencies that have oversight to modernize this formula. So that's a little bit of a shock to the system, and I know that we will get pushback, but we are building a very strong coalition across 50 states. Ultimately, I want this to be bipartisan. It's a conversation that is long overdue, and it's a change that is long overdue as well. So I think that will be a centerpiece of my work, but we're also going to be pursuing lots of other approaches.
Well, let's talk about a few of your accomplishments, and if you don't mind. So a recent mailer states delivering millions for our community. And you have secured $14.36 million that will support 15 local projects in District 15. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to read a couple.
Okay.
$3.2 million for roadway safety and streetscape upgrades in East Palo Alto and Daly City. $1.67 million to improve the Centennial Way Trail in South San Francisco and transform underutilized land into a community park. And then there was another one, among all of them, but another one that was $2 million to bring a new YMCA and the new Middlefield Junction Early Learning Center to Redwood City.
Yeah.
That's a lot of dough, man. That's a lot of money that you're raising out there, huh? To make things happen?
Well, I'm proud of that. I'm also, I'm reminded of the scale. I wish that were a 14 billion as opposed to 14 million. I guess I was pleasantly surprised that even in the minority party, you were able to bring money home for what are considered community benefit projects. They are mostly infrastructure in nature, nuts and bolts challenges that communities face around stormwater and trail improvements, recreational access, things that are truly beneficial to the community that need a little bit of extra federal help. Most of these have local sources of funds too, but have a little bit of a funding gap, and the federal government can put in to help bring projects to completion. But I'm also mindful of how little in some cases we're able to bring given the nature of the project.
Okay.
And just one example there, the Broadway, Burlingame Broadway grade separation.
You're going to use my hometown as an example here. I love it.
So that grade grade separations can cost $200 to $300 million, just one, right? And I'm going to be advocating, and this is something, Emily Beach from the council is talking to me about. Michael Brownrigg, Donna Colson, the leadership here in Burlingame has been advocating for this. It is the number one safety concern in the state of California, this grade separation. While we're electrifying Caltrain and we're tripling capacity up and down the corridor, this really only works when you make a number of grade separation improvements. Otherwise, you have the potential of backing up traffic east-west around these Caltrain crossings. So this really needs like a huge federal line item on infrastructure. And it's not just our peninsula; it's around the country. There should be a separate pot, I believe, for grade separations, and it doesn't exist. We've got a president that has focused on train travel, and he's focused on infrastructure. We have the right president in office. He created these separate pots of money. I think, however, there should be a sort of dedicated bucket for these grade separations, and it's the kind of project that the federal government should be funding. That in some cases has the capacity to fund that locals don't. But I'm going to do what I can in terms of getting some additional seed money for that project, and then I want to advocate with our transportation secretary. There are some big grant funds out there that this project should qualify for. So we're going to do the political push on that one and try to
can I ask you something about the funding then, how this works? So what do you get, like a letter from Brown Rig or Mayor Colson or from the Burlingame City Council saying, hey, dear Kevin, we need some money to remodel the Broadway overpass, right? Yeah. And somebody from your staff says, oh, that looks interesting. They pass it on to you, and then you think, how does that whole thing develop? Where does the money come from?
So this annual appropriations process, we know that we're going to have about $15 million to work with, which again, we certainly were proud of that we're able to get that money. I wish it were more. But we will sit down. Well, first of all, we will communicate with the various local agencies, the cities, and request information from them about projects that they may have a need for. Part of my effort has been trying to connect with the district, not get sort of lost in Washington. I used to call it YOLO Causeway amnesia when I went to Sacramento. You don't never want to get YOLO Causeway amnesia.
Okay.
I don't want to get Alaska Airlines amnesia and get sort of caught up in the Washington thing. I want to be rooted in what's happening here in my district. So this is a great way actually to connect with the local cities, find out what their needs are. See how we might be able to fund these projects. We always get more requests, of course, than we can possibly fund. And it's not just us funding it, right? This has to get approved, right? So we submit all of these appropriations requests, and we'll get feedback from the Appropriations Committee staff. But there is sort of a general understanding. They used to be called earmarks. Now they're called community benefit projects that even if you're in the minority party, you're able to get some money. And so this will be an annual process, but you have to make the case. You have to make sure that you're getting the right information from the locals, that the application that you're putting forth, and it's really, it feels very much like an application process, that you're submitting enough information that the committee staff and the committee members look at that and say, yes, that is a good use of federal tax money. And, the locals have done what they need to do to make this project go.
Right.
And we have exceptional local officials on the peninsula and exceptional staff who really do much of the heavy lifting in terms of getting these applications ready. But look, this is a relationship business, right? Politics is a relationship business. I have known Michael for a long time. Emily was a competitor of mine.
She was a couple of years ago. Yeah,
I got to see her up close and her skill at communicating and how she ran a campaign and how she conducted herself. I have great admiration for her. Donna Colson, I too have known. I've known a number of these people since I was an aide to Jackie Spear.
Yeah,
and these are people that I have full confidence in, right? So there's that political dimension, but ultimately you've got exceptional local staff that tee that up. The challenge with that project, and I'm probably going into the weeds here, but some of the big pots of money for infrastructure, I'm trying to figure out if there's a political dimension to where some of that money goes. Does it go to purple states that are in question on presidential campaigns, those kinds of things?
Right.
It shouldn't work that way.
Right.
But the reality is this is a political world we're operating in. And sometimes I wonder if California is at something of a disadvantage because, we sort of know how we're going to be voting in the presidential election.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not making any accusations. I'm simply saying I'm trying to figure out kind of how these decisions get made at the higher levels in terms of the administration and what the administration will get behind. I think having, again, going political here, having a Californian like Kamala Harris in the Oval Office who understands California, who has relationships with California members, who understands all of our issues when it comes to costs and infrastructure and housing challenges, it will be helpful to have somebody in the Oval Office who is from California and from the Bay Area that we have relationships with. So you might be able to detect I'm pulling hard for Kamala Harris.
You didn't get political at all there, Kevin. Okay, that's fine. Oh, I love it. Okay. In addition to the poverty line legislation you introduced, what else is on the burner?
So actually, the very first bill I introduced, the WRAP Act, we like our acronyms in Washington.
Yeah, I know.
The Weatherization Resilience Adaptation Program, which is a mouthful, but essentially it would create a program for lower income property owners, homeowners, to weatherize their homes and get their homes ready for climate change. Fire resistant roofs, defensible space, essentially. Climate change is not going to distinguish between red states and blue states. This is climate resilience, climate readiness. Just look at the extreme weather that's happening, the extreme heat that we're dealing with, even as we record this across the country. The tornadoes, hurricanes, fires, just wildfires in California that we're dealing with. The nature of the challenge is such that we need to enable lower income homeowners to get their properties and their homes ready. So this would essentially create a new program, but it is also part of a larger conversation around depoliticizing climate change policy, right? Like this is happening, right? The science will tell you the climate is changing. And there's a separate conversation, I think, around policy, greenhouse gas reductions, carbon capture, the whole range of issues to try to tackle that problem. And that's an incredibly important conversation to have. I've also focused on climate resilience and climate readiness to get us ready for what is to come. And we, in this area, are very much on the front line of climate change with what we have going on the Bayfront. And we need to make sure we get federal dollars for wetlands restoration, natural ways to deal with the rising bay level, the inundation zone, if you will, up and down the peninsula on the east side of One-Way, all the property values that are at risk, like $24 billion just in our county at risk from climate change. So huge issues, right?
They sure are. Yeah.
The funding to this point, we had $400 billion in the Inflation Reduction Act, which is great in terms of building a green economy and dealing with climate, but it's not to the scale of this challenge that we have. So this is one way to get into that broader climate conversation. I also have an Earthquake Resilience Act, the new ERA, we're calling it. It would create a risk assessment, national risk assessment for earthquakes. I mean, we are earthquake country, but billions and billions of dollars lost every year from earthquakes across the country. Things that don't get covered, honestly.
I know.
In the things you don't hear about, that there are earthquakes happening across the country, creating lots of damage. So there's a risk assessment that this legislation would call for in terms of getting utilities back online. I mean, that's a huge issue. Just post-earthquake, what kind of plan do we have to get critical infrastructure back online? There have been challenges on the coast. We know just in terms of outages and those kinds of things that would be exacerbated in the event of a major earthquake. And it would look at sort of a better dealing with better dealing with the aftershocks of large earthquakes and sort of the readiness after a big event. What happens with the sort of aftershock portion of these major earthquake events, and there are some gaps there that we've identified. So that too, gets into the emergency readiness space. I hosted a digital town hall on emergency readiness. I've tried to get some funding, which we think we are going to get actually, for urban search and rescue efforts across the country. These are the folks that go in after the disasters.
Yeah, terrific.
Hit. We think we have a really good shot at tens of millions of dollars actually to help fund those operations. So that is sort of separate from the district, although we have a really sort of gold standard urban search and rescue team. Team number 3 headed out of the Menlo Park Fire Protection District. They are our search team 3. They are sort of a team that is used as a model for urban search and rescue. One of the very first, actually, post 9/11, to develop this team. So we've got some real expertise right here in Menlo Park and right here on the peninsula. So, but they are in need of additional funds. They haven't been given an increase in quite some time. So that's a little niche, but it is necessary funding, and I think we'll be successful.
You got some things on the burner.
Yes.
All right. Let's do a little rapid fire here, okay?
Uh-oh.
You ready for this? This is a little fun. We're going to talk about November for a minute. Very important. Yeah. You're running for re-election. Any goals for the second term?
So the goals for the second term would be, first of all, getting a majority. So we're able to control the gavels, and that sort of gets back to the political side of the shop. I'm helping on that front. I would like to serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee. That will be decided. And there's a whole internal political process, which I won't bore you with.
Yeah.
But that is a campaign that I have to run.
Yeah, it's not just an opening and you just jump in, right? You have to go.
So this is something you've got to get support from all of I'm in Region 2. Mm-hmm. I've got to get support from all of my Region 2 colleagues. I've got to really run a campaign, talk about what I want to do with that position. Ultimately, if you have the regional support, it matriculates up into our own Democratic leadership, all the way up to Hakeem Jeffries, our leader, to sort of put his stamp on approval on that. If I'm able to get on that committee, that really changes the nature of my work in Washington, D.C. in terms of what the staff would be focused on.
Yeah.
The Energy and Commerce Committee, the jurisdiction is broad. In fact, there's this story about John Dingell, the late John Dingell, when he was chair of that committee, and I probably get this wrong a little bit here, but he would point to a globe and say, "That's the jurisdiction of my committee," and he'd point to the globe.
Really?
Essentially saying, the energy and commerce is this broad umbrella of issues, all sorts of business issues. When you're talking about climate and green energy, clean energy, just the word commerce alone indicates that this has a broad purview. So it's really the breadth of that committee, I think, is what has drawn me to that. But there's absolutely no guarantee that I get appointed to that committee. Mm-hmm. That would be, again, something of a political process in Capitol Hill, and I hope to get on that committee. So that is a focus, sort of a short term, but that would affect the work that I do. I want to continue being connected with my district. We'll probably do a little bit of an internal audit at the end of my freshman term to see, if there were gaps that existed in terms of doing the job for locals for the district. But that will continue to be an emphasis of mine, is being a district-based legislator, which people are like, well, yeah, everybody's a district-based legislator. They all come from a district, but many folks don't live in their district. They live in Washington, D.C., and they will come home every now and again to their district. I have chosen to live in my district.
You sure do.
And treat it more like business travel when I go. But I'm rooted here. My family's here. I'm a San Mateo County native. And so I'm never going to forget, where I come from.
Where the roots are.
Yeah, that's right.
What's it going to take for the Democrats to be successful in November?
I think that on the presidential level, I think this is going to come down to actually a fairly simple equation of, do you want to go forward or do you want to go backwards as a country? Mm-hmm. You could not have a more stark differentiation between the two major candidates in terms of even what they represent. And you're going to see that in the debate as well. Kamala Harris is poised to take this country forward. I would be absolutely thrilled to have a Californian who understands our unique set of issues in the state in the Oval Office. In terms of the House, I think what you hear our leader talk about is establishing some normalcy in terms of governing. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's not sexy, but the reality is we have witnessed some real extremism where the leadership of the Republicans in the House have been held hostage essentially by a very small slice of that caucus who aren't interested in governing. And the extremism is simply not helpful. You mentioned Reagan, right? I grew up during the Reagan years, and there used to be a Republican Party where there was a legitimate political philosophy around fiscal conservatism, around pro-business principles, around strong national defense, strong national security, about a set of freedoms. That Republican Party, that traditional Republican Party, has lost its way, and the Republican Party has become the party of Donald Trump. And for the sake of that party, they need to rid themselves of Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And he needs to be put in the dustbin of history, right? And this country needs to move forward. This is a pivotal moment for this country to choose a path forward that's future-oriented, but is focused on people's needs, not on clicks and likes and misinformation and disinformation on social media. Yeah. It actually gets back to governing. Wouldn't that be refreshing if we actually got back to governing and dealing with what are really enormous challenges out there? And I'm a Democrat, but I'm concerned about fiscal responsibility too, and the kind of debt that we are handing off to our children and our grandchildren. I want us to look at tax policy in this country and undo some of the unnecessary corporate tax cuts. There are a whole range of issues where we need to sort of revert back to stability and governing and fiscal responsibility, and also doing it in a way that focuses our energies around the needs of the middle class who are hurting in this country when it comes to costs and their needs. And we are the epicenter of the affordability crisis here on the peninsula. I want to do more about that. I think there's a path there with a Democratic president, a Democratic House and Senate, and hopefully if we can restrain our own extreme impulses, if we could restrain some of those and really just focus on mainstream governing, that would move this country forward. But we shall see.
Wow.
It's up to the voters.
Thank you, Kevin. One last question before, then I got a couple other little things to wrap it up with. But let's say that Hakeem Jeffries calls on you and says, Kevin, what kind of advice would you give Vice President Harris right now?
Right now?
Yep.
In terms of winning the election?
Absolutely. Yep.
I would say focus on the middle class. These are two candidates, middle-class girl raised in Oakland, middle-class boy raised in Nebraska who set up shop in Minnesota and was a high school football coach and a teacher, as the son of a basketball coach and a teacher at South City High. I love Tim Walz's biography. But they are not that different than the people I grew up with and the people who are middle-class individuals, not born with wealth, not born with a really unusual or unique set of circumstances, I think they have a chance to resonate with ordinary, everyday Americans and demonstrate that they are in touch with the everyday challenges and just pound away on that, right? I don't think, Donald Trump is focused on himself and staying out of prison. J.D. Vance, frankly, I don't know much about other than I met him once. He's a heck of an author. He's got a really interesting background and story. But, ultimately he was a venture capital guy in the San Francisco Bay Area and operated in very elite circles. I think Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have an opportunity to really direct a message to the middle class. And if they can do that, they can win. And I would just say, don't get distracted by all of the negative, personal, and believe me, the ugly attacks are coming.
Yeah.
And
it's just heating up now, isn't it? It's just heating up.
Absolutely. And not get distracted by that and focus on a message, because ultimately this is about everyday Americans and how they feel about who is running their government, and focus on their needs, not their own individual needs or issues around trying to stay out of prison. Focus on the needs of the people and direct every message there, and you'll be successful.
Okay, good. We're close to wrapping up. Where can interested folks find more information about you, donations, and volunteering for your campaign?
For my campaign, they can reach out to, it's kevinmullin.com.
kevinmullin.com.
Actually, I take that back. It's kevinmullinforcongress.com.
I like it.
We have our website there and my ballot statement. I am hoping that I can direct people if they have needs around federal issues to my official office. If I can give you that information. That phone number is 650-342-0300.
Would that be the San Mateo office?
Yes, that's the San Mateo office, 650-342-0300. And that, by the way, I think it was 415 at the time, but that phone number has been the same phone number, I believe, dating back to the Leo Ryan
that goes
days,
back.
Which is honestly, sort of taking this a different direction briefly, but I'm reminded all the time about the legacy of who has represented this district. Dating back to Leo Ryan, South City guy, South City mayor, a teacher, like my dad, who served in the Assembly and then Congress. Tom Lantos, Holocaust survivor, an icon in this county, and who left an unbelievable legacy when it came to foreign relations. And then my predecessor and my mentor, Jackie Spear, the bar that she has set. That has been the biggest challenge, frankly. Is you're stepping into those shoes, and I welcome it, but it is a very, very high bar of representation from this district dating back decades and decades. So that responsibility certainly lands on me, and I take it very seriously. But we're here to serve. It's an honor for me to represent this district. I want to make sure that whoever has a need among my 762,000 constituents, they need to have needs with the federal government. We are there to help.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, I'm sure you're going to fill those shoes up. We love your enthusiasm and your energy that you brought today. And how about a little shout out to your wife and two little boys that are sitting in South San Francisco right now waiting for you to maybe come home, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
Shout out to Jessica Stanton-Mullin, who, by the way, just started a new role with the County of San Mateo. She works at the Housing Department, working on some of our toughest issues around housing. And my two little boys, Liam and Landon. And we just added a husky. Mark, we
gotta have a dog, man.
Gotta have a dog, man. If you want a friend in politics, get a dog. So our husky Storm, we just adopted from the Peninsula Humane Society, from the Tom Lantos Center.
I was going to say that's the Tom Lantos, right?
That's right, and
terrific.
They do an incredible job, and we're breaking him in here. So we're about a week and a half in, and he's doing great. So. life is good.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful.
When do you head back to Washington?
So we're back on September the 10th.
Oh, that's the day of the debate, isn't it? And the debate that day?
So that night will be the debate. So we got some votes that night, and then we'll all adjourn to watch the debate somewhere. But I'll be here on the 9th when the 49ers open their season. I'm not going to the game, but I'll be at home watching.
But you'll be home watching.
Got it.
Monday Night Football. U.S. Congressman Kevin Mullin, thank you so much for being here today.
Honor to be with you, Mark. Thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you. I'd like to thank U.S. Congressman Kevin Mullin for giving us a glimpse inside Washington, D.C. today and for being my guest on Burlingame. It's a small town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. If you like our podcast, please hit the like button, make a comment, and subscribe. Thanks to the great Ray Tyler for videography, original music by Bray. You can hear more of Bray at braymusic.com. This podcast was recorded at the Burlingame Public Library on Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. The Burlingame Historical Society copyrights this program, and no part can be copied and replayed without the written consent of the Burlingame Historical Society. So until next time, everyone, see you around Burlingame. It's a small town.